The southern African country of Namibia is internationally renowned for its iconic wildlife and dramatic scenery. It is also home to a new kind of conservation.
The idea behind Naankuse really started with Marlies and the way she grew up and her affinity for the San community.
What began as a clinic to improve the health and well-being of her neighbors turned into one woman's dream to help save a community.
I see the need, and then poor guy, he has to come up with some idea to make it work.
A husband and wife's lifelong mission to build a sanctuary and a mindset where animals get a second chance and people get to share in the benefits.
I always thought, okay, I want to work with animals and want to work with the San Bushmen and help where we can.
It's a personal approach to saving the environment, relying on vital field work and embracing latest technologies.
We're doing anti-poaching exercises, basically seeing how well a drone can spot humans in the bush.
This is the story of one couple's commitment to sustainable conservation in Namibia. This is Naankuse. This is Inside Africa. Imagine a place where animals and people coexist. While some would say it's a dream, there are people in Namibia who are working at making it a reality. Founded in 2006 by Rudy and Marlies van Vuren, their Naankuse Foundation aims to conserve the land as well as the people and wildlife living on it. At the beginning, their wildlife conservation work consisted primarily of providing a second chance to countless orphaned, injured, and abandoned animals.
Marlies is great at looking after animals, raising animals, caring for animals.
For years, animals had found their way to Marlies and Rudy, many of them growing up alongside their two sons.
Some of these animals are conflict animals, some of these animals are injured animals, and some were raised as pets by humans.
When it comes to the animals, I take it personally. So it's not a job for me, you get into my character.
Marlies has been rescuing and hand-rearing animals since she was a child.
Actually had an amazing childhood. I thought it was normal, and I grew up between baboons were my best friends and animals and lions sleeping in my bed.
Marlies grew up on her parents' farm, Harness, surrounded by animals. She soon realized that caring for and rescuing wildlife would be a lifelong commitment.
Of course, I don't want to see the animal captivity. I would love to see all of them in the wild.
People always say, just release all animals back into the wild. It's not that easy. Especially with animals that were raised by humans as pets. Many of those animals are also predator naive. So if you release them back into the wild, you send them to a certain death.
Rehabilitation of wildlife, it's not a fairy tale. I mean, people think it's you get an animal, you rehabilitate it, and off it goes and it can function normally, but it's not the case.
With the immense responsibility of caring for the creatures that surround them came a sobering sense that releasing an animal is seldom straightforward and can even be traumatic.
It's like a mum that sometimes just knows, and I know that if I release this animal, it's not going to make it in 2 or 3 days, it will be gone.
Marlies grew up alongside wild animals, but her empathy for them has a lot to do with her unique relationship with the first people of Namibia, the San.
Grew up with Bushmen. I spoke Bushman before I spoke Afrikaans, my mother tongue, and I always thought, okay, I want to work with animals and want to work with the San Bushmen, and I dream in Bushmen. If I speak Bushman, I think in Bushman.
For Rudy and Marlies, the San had a lot to teach, and they welcomed their wisdom as they set out on their endeavor.
If you look at the way they approach nature and how they handle nature, how soft they are on nature and how non-consumptive they are, you can just learn from them.
San trackers like Debbie and Opa continue to help them find animals that have been successfully rehabilitated at the sanctuary and released. Their expertise is also essential in tracking so-called problem animals.
I realized that there's a real synergy here between how the San people read nature and what we're trying to achieve, reducing human-wildlife conflict so that less animals come into captivity.
In Namibia, a country where farmland has encroached on much of what was largely wilderness, there is an ongoing battle between wildlife and farmers.
We try to do applied research, so something that we can take to farmers and to the guys out there and say, look, this is something that works to protect your livestock and at the same time ensure that wildlife survives.
The Naankuse team is able to capture, collar, and release a predator so it can be tracked and its location shared with the farmer.
If it's not a proven problem animal, that the animal can be released right there on site. Sometimes farmers don't want the animal on their farm released with or without a collar, and then you have to look at alternatives.
An alternative is translocation, but moving predators is complicated and has had mixed results. One of the success stories took place at Naankuse's 14,000-hectare Noirus Reserve, which was home to one of the world's longest monitored free-roaming leopards.
You need to find a site where there's low predator competition, and of course there needs to be food and water for them.
Over the last 10 years, Naankuse says it has released more than 35 cheetahs back into the wild, many of them collared.
All the cheetahs that we've released that were not hand-raised but came in as youngsters that could have been released afterwards, 100% of them were shot afterwards.
For certain key species, Rudy and Marlies are able to translocate to one of their other reserves, such as Zunir, a 7,500-hectare conservation site just adjacent to Naankuse.
We knew that we couldn't put all the animals that come to us in captivity. That's not a long-term sustainable solution. So we had to look at the drivers of conflict and to reduce the number of animals coming to us.
We end up with the problem, raising this animal, and then where do you go? We have to look after that animal. If it lives for 50 years, I have to look after it for 50 years.
Many times, caring for the animals at Naankuse requires individual attention. These baboons, orphaned at a young age and hand-reared, are habituated to humans. For them, there is no prospect of release. They are, however, taken for daily walks to provide them with exercise, and Marlies often joins them, having raised many of them herself. She is part of the troop.
Naankuse started off as a relatively small project, and it was purely from passion of trying to save as many animals as they can, especially with Marlies being so passionate about it. But it's developed to such a big scale now because of that passion, and it remains the core of everything that we try and do.
Ahead, Naankuse's innovative conservation embraces drone technology in the fight against poachers. From sands to savannas, Namibia is a land of extreme beauty. Namibian conservationists Rudy and Marlies van Vuren have made it their mission to protect and preserve these treasures by establishing wildlife research projects across their country. Through their Naankuse Foundation, they are trying to help people coexist with wildlife by changing perceptions.
Our view of research is we need to do research to produce evidence. Evidence needs to influence legislation and laws so that the situation can change.
Naankuse has 8 full-time researchers based at sites in Namibia, working with carnivores and so-called key species like rhinos and elephants.
We've got Kanon, which is basically aimed at our spotted desert hyena research work. Then we've got Noirus, where we've just completed a leopard project. Then we've got Naankuse itself, where we do a lot of human-wildlife conflict work. And then our last research site that we've got is Mangeti. We've got African wild dogs as well as elephant that we're monitoring there. And both of those species are causing a tremendous amount of conflict. And we're trying to find new ways and different ways for those farmers to coexist with the wild dogs as well as the elephant.
Naankuse field researcher Stuart Monroe has found drones to be enormously helpful in his work in the northeastern Kalahari woodlands.
In the Mangeti, drones have been really an invaluable tool.
Researchers used to rely on the road network to make observations of the elephants in this sprawling 160,000 hectare conservation area. Drones changed all that.
The footage that I got showed that the elephant population up there was not the 75 that was estimated. I counted over 110 elephants in that herd. So straight away, that gave us a whole new appreciation of the level of the elephant population and the potential problems that we have up there.
Drone footage has also confirmed the damage that elephants can inflict on pipes and water tanks.
It's all centered around water and access and availability of drinking water for the elephants.
Looking to further embrace drone technology as part of their conservation initiatives, Naankuse teamed up with students from the University of North Carolina in the United States.
This is now the third year they've been here. And the nature of it is multidisciplinary. You've got aerospace engineers, mechanical engineers, and wildlife biologists working together.
We're purchasing drones and then customizing them for the purposes of the exercises we'll be running out here. We're doing anti-poaching exercises, so how the eye in the sky can help pinpoint and make poachers stop their movement so that the ground units can actually come in and intercept them.
The NCSU group that's coming to us, they've been a great aid. They've helped us publish a paper on the role of drones in poaching and how it can help us.
Along with anti-poaching applications, drones are also being used by Naankuse for biodiversity surveys, aerial mapping, and for animal counting.
Normally this is a very expensive operation involving helicopters, planes, and the aim of these guys at NC State is to see how we can make this more affordable and practical so that we can repeat it more often.
We've been trying to design different flight plans for the drones to fly, and then once we're done with that, we can look at the pictures and analyze the photos to make sure that we count all the game in there.
Another group of North Carolina University students help collar a cheetah and conduct health checks.
Rudy and Marlise, they helped out a lot with showing us what to do, and Cobus, he's just amazing. He explains everything in detail.
So what you try and do is, if you want to get the exact length,
If we have a question, he answers it more than what we needed answered.
Rudy and Marlise have welcomed volunteers to Naankuse's reserves since 2007.
30% of our volunteers come back. And I'm incredibly proud of our volunteers because they go back to their countries in the developed world and they're the greatest ambassadors that you can ask for.
One of the biggest backers of the Van Vuren's efforts has been actress Angelina Jolie. In honor of her Namibian-born daughter, she helped open the Shiloh Wildlife Sanctuary and fund other initiatives through her Jolie Pitt Foundation. Rudy Van Vuren is himself something of an ambassador for Namibia. For years, he has shown investors and philanthropists the very best of this country, from the passenger seat of his 50-year-old Cessna.
The aeroplane became a very useful tool.
It has also been used as an air ambulance and to track collared wildlife.
In those days, we didn't have GPS collars, so we had to put on VHF collars if we translocated animals and we released them again. And so we had to fly, track them from the air, locate them, and then log that data.
Collaring predators remains a crucial part of Naankuse's carnivore conservation research program, and nowhere is this more important than here at Kenan, in the semi-desert of the Namibian South. It is home to a number of carnivores like the agile African cat, the caraco, whose acrobatic hunting techniques are a sight to behold. For the last 5 years, this reserve has offered biologist Carl Fester the opportunity to develop new techniques in his study of the spotted hyena.
The work I do here at Kanaan is focusing mainly on the human-wildlife conflict mitigation, principally with the spotted hyenas that we have here.
Persecuted for years due to conflict with commercial livestock, these largely misunderstood carnivores are now monitored and studied to gain insight into their behavior and their movements.
Here in the desert, where we don't have many resources and lower densities, animals are extending much further and potentially bringing them into much more conflict situations.
To be sure of a hyena's movements, it has to be trapped, collared, released, and then monitored via telemetry. Trapping a hyena, however, is easier said than done.
Because the hyenas have learned our patterns, they tend to outsmart us now with the collaring attempts.
Carl is constantly fine-tuning the trap system he has developed.
The hyena's only mode of access to the bait on the inside is through the trap cage, which when triggered closes a gate behind the hyena but confines them to a larger area. If they're active overnight, they get caught. Early morning, within a few hours, we can have that animal anesthetized, collared and released with as little stress as possible.
When baiting the trap, he doesn't use livestock but prefers antelope carcasses.
We use usually the smellier parts of it, because a spotted hyena, a scent trail like that, could smell up to 2.5 to 3 kilometers downwind.
As the sun rises, teams head to check 2 baited traps that were left overnight.
The north cage is empty.
And lo and behold, there was nothing. But we remain hopeful.
Projects like this require patience and persistence.
We've been monitoring these 2 family groups from the beginning of Kanaan, and opportunities like that in the real world just do not exist. It's very time consuming, and in order to get the right sponsorship and the right support to do an extensive project like this, organizations like Naankuse are extremely essential.
Coming up, Rudy and Marlies van Vuren return to where the Naankuse story all began. Here in the expansive natural beauty of Namibia, Naankuse's wildlife reserves have proven fertile ground for rehabilitating wildlife and rescuing threatened species. What is less well known is where it all began. Naankuse's roots go back more than 15 years to a dry, economically depressed area called Ipukiro.
I grew up in the east of Namibia, close to the Botswana border, and was the youngest of 3, and I was the only girl.
Marlies grew up with animals as playmates and with the San as her best friends. She learned their language and spoke San fluently from a young age.
It's one of the most difficult languages to learn because I learned it from such a young age. It's second nature. So.
Marlies always says that if you don't speak the language, you can't understand the culture.
My father always pushed after we got married. He said, you can speak the language, Rudy is a doctor, you need to start helping out there, go out, see patients.
In 2003, Marlies and Rudy joined forces with friends Chris Heunis and eye surgeon Dr. Jannis Brandt.
The story from there evolved with some Dutch philanthropist, Jan Verburg, becoming involved and helping us establish the clinic. As a medical doctor, a place like the clinic lies close to your heart. That came naturally for me to help Marlies in her quest to help the San people.
We saw this big need, and every time we go back, there's something new that we think, okay, we have to take this further. There's much more to be done, and every time we go back. But the one thing me and Rudy always said to one another is if we do anything, it has to be sustainable in some way.
Located in Namibia's east, the clinic says it provides free health care to around 4,500 San patients each year.
It's really important because the people, especially the San people in the community, really need treatment.
Today, a local San chief who came to this area with his family almost 50 years ago is a patient. He has come for treatment and also hopes to have his eyesight restored.
I miss the hunt. I want to be able to hunt again. And now I've lost much of the use of my eyes. I would love to hunt again before I can't see anything anymore.
Unemployment is prevalent here amongst the San in Epokiro. Located outside the Namibian capital Windhoek, the Naankuse Wildlife Sanctuary provides many with jobs in the tourism industry.
I grew up in that industry, and that's where we actually said, okay, from housekeeping all the way through to a driver, we can accommodate more people in a job.
As their workforce grew, Rudy and Marlies felt the need to provide free education for staff families, and 10 years ago, the Clever Cubs School was set up in the heart of the sanctuary. Naankuse tour guide Balon Teko has a daughter at the school.
Suzette is actually in a Clever Cubs School. She started pre-primary here and she's still here. It's actually a good opportunity to have a school actually right at home.
While the local community embraced the education opportunity, Marlies worried children might lose their identity and that invaluable connection to their heritage.
We send their children to school, but they never spend time with their parents in the veld. They learn to speak a slang Bushman. Most of them are ashamed and shy to say I'm Bushman, so we had to come up with a new idea.
The Van Furens decided to establish an academy at Naankuse that would allow young San and visitors to the reserve to hear the San language and to see traditional skills demonstrated.
They show how they used to hunt, how they used to make fire. People find it very interesting to spend time with them. But they also have a second responsibility, and that's to transfer those skills to the San people working at Naankuse.
Cindy is a San who works at Naankuse as an equine coordinator. Like Marlies, she grew up among wildlife and farm animals, learning to ride a horse at a young age.
I love being so close to the horses and being able to hug them and getting the attention from that horse, and also to get so close to the animals.
From clinics to animals to schools, the Van Furens say their life's work has always been about helping their neighbors.
I always thought, okay, I want to work with the San Bushmen and I want to work with animals and help where we can. And I think looking at Naankuse at this stage, I never thought it's going to be anything close to this.